I woke up that Tuesday morning in January to find my driveway completely blocked by a massive wall of snow that definitely wasn't there when I went to bed. Living in Syracuse, New York, I was used to heavy snowfall, but this wasn't natural accumulation. Someone had deliberately piled snow at least 4 feet high across the entire entrance to my property, and I had a pretty good idea who was responsible. My name is Henry Owens, and I'd lived in the Meadowbrook Hills subdivision for 3 years. It was one of those cookie-cutter neighborhoods where every house looked vaguely similar, and the homeowners association had more rules than the IRS tax code. The HOA was run by a woman named Patricia Whitmore, though everyone called her the Snow Queen behind her back, and not because of the weather. She was 52 years old, had the trademark "I want to speak to the manager" haircut, and treated the HOA presidency like she was running a military dictatorship. I grabbed my phone and took several photos of the snow barrier blocking my driveway. The pile was perfectly placed to prevent any vehicle from entering or exiting my property. I was supposed to be at work in 90 minutes, and there was no way I could clear this by hand in time. My truck was stuck in the garage, and I'd have to call my boss to explain why I'd be late. Again. This wasn't the first time Patricia had targeted me. Our feud started 6 months ago when I painted my front door a deep navy blue. According to the HOA rules, all front doors were supposed to be either white, beige, or light gray. I thought the rule was ridiculous and argued that navy blue was close enough to the approved colors. Patricia disagreed and sent me a violation notice with a $500 fine. I refused to pay it and painted my mailbox navy blue too, just to make a point. Things escalated from there. She reported me for leaving my trash cans visible from the street for more than 12 hours after collection. She claimed my lawn was a 1/4 inch too tall and violated the grass height regulations. She even tried to fine me because my cat, Mr. Whiskers, was allegedly harassing neighborhood birds. Every week brought a new violation notice, a new fine, and a new level of petty vindictiveness. But blocking my driveway with snow crossed a line. This wasn't just annoying anymore. This was interfering with my ability to go to work and earn a living. I called my neighbor, Danny, who lived 2 houses down. He answered on the 3rd ring, his voice groggy with sleep. "What's up, Henry? It's barely 7 in the morning. Did you see anyone plowing snow into my driveway last night?" "What? No, man. I went to bed around 10. "Why?" I explained the situation, and Danny promised to come take a look. 5 minutes later, he was standing in my front yard, staring at the massive snow barrier with his mouth hanging open. "Holy crap, she actually did this." "Who else would it be?" Danny shook his head. "This is insane. Even for Patricia, you need to call the police or something, and tell them what? Someone moved snow onto my property. They'll laugh me off the phone. This is blocking your driveway, Henry." That's got to be illegal. He had a point. I went inside and called the non-emergency police line. The dispatcher sounded bored as she took my information and said an officer would come by when one was available. I then called my boss and explained that I'd be late due to an incident at my house. He wasn't happy about it, but what could I do? While waiting for the police, I decided to do some investigating. I walked around the snow pile, examining it closely. The snow was packed hard, obviously pushed there by some kind of plow or heavy equipment. I noticed tire tracks in the street that led directly to the pile and then continued down the road. The tracks were wide and deep, consistent with a large truck or tractor. Patricia lived 4 houses down from me on the opposite side of the street. Her house was one of the larger ones in the neighborhood, a sprawling 2-story colonial with perfect landscaping and a 3-car garage. I walked down the sidewalk and noticed something interesting in her driveway. There was a small utility trailer parked next to her silver Mercedes. The trailer had a plow attachment on the front, and it was covered in fresh snow and ice, so she'd done it herself. Or more likely, she'd paid someone to do it. Either way, I had my proof. A Syracuse police officer arrived about 45 minutes later. His name was Officer Martinez, and he looked like he'd rather be anywhere else than dealing with neighborhood drama. I showed him the snow pile, the tire tracks, and Patricia's trailer with the plow attachment. He took notes and photos, then walked down to Patricia's house and rang her doorbell. I watched from my front yard as Patricia answered the door wearing a pink bathrobe and fuzzy slippers. Even from a distance, I could see her face light up with fake concern as Officer Martinez spoke with her. She gestured animatedly, shaking her head and placing her hand over her heart like she was shocked by the accusation. The conversation lasted about 10 minutes before Officer Martinez walked back to my house. "Well," I asked, "Mrs. Whitmore claims she hired a private snow removal service last night to clear her driveway and the street in front of her house. She says she has no knowledge of how the snow ended up blocking your driveway and suggests that the service may have made an error in where they deposited the snow." "That's complete garbage. Look at the tire tracks. They go straight from the street to my driveway. This was deliberate." Officer Martinez sighed. "Mr. Owens, I believe you, but proving intent is difficult. Mrs. Whitmore is claiming it was an accident, and without witnesses or video evidence, it's your word against hers. So she can just block my driveway and get away with it. I'm going to file a report, and you can use it if you decide to pursue civil action. But from a criminal standpoint, there's not much I can do. I've advised Mrs. Whitmore that if anything like this happens again, there will be consequences. That's the best I can offer right now." Officer Martinez left, and I stood in my front yard feeling frustrated and powerless. I'd lost half my workday, and Patricia was probably inside her house laughing at me. I needed to clear the snow pile so I could get to work, but hiring a snow removal service would cost money I shouldn't have to spend. The whole situation was infuriating. Then, I remembered something. My buddy Jake owned a landscaping business and had a big truck with a plow attachment. I called him and explained what happened. Jake was familiar with Patricia and her antics because he did lawn care for several houses in the neighborhood. She tried to get him banned from working in Meadowbrook Hills after he accidentally left some grass clippings on the sidewalk. "I'll come over right now," Jake said, "and I won't even charge you. Anyone who stands up to that woman is a friend of mine." Jake arrived 30 minutes later with his massive Ford F-350 and a serious plow attachment on the front. He surveyed the snow pile and whistled. "She really went all out, didn't she? Can you clear it?" "Oh, I can do better than that." Jake had a mischievous glint in his eye. "I can clear your driveway and relocate all this snow somewhere more appropriate." "What do you mean? Where do you think all this snow should go, Henry? I mean, if we're being fair about it, whoever put it on your property should probably take responsibility for it, right?" I understood what he was suggesting. It was petty and vindictive and probably violated about 15 HOA rules. It was also exactly what Patricia deserved. Her front lawn, Jake confirmed. "Every single flake, and I'll pack it down nice and tight so it'll take weeks to melt." We spent the next hour executing our plan. Jake used his truck to push the snow pile away from my driveway, creating a clear path for my truck. Then, working carefully and methodically, he began transporting the snow down the street. Load by load, the massive pile of snow that had blocked my driveway was relocated to Patricia's pristine front lawn. Several neighbors came out to watch. Danny stood on his front porch with a cup of coffee, grinning. Mrs. Chen from across the street gave me a thumbs up. Even old Mr. Patterson, who usually kept to himself, came outside and nodded approvingly. Patricia had annoyed or angered most of the neighborhood at some point, and people were enjoying the show. By the time we finished, Patricia's front lawn looked like a mountain range. There were snow piles 6 feet high in some places, completely obscuring her flower beds and decorative bushes. Her walkway was buried, and there was enough snow to build an igloo. It was beautiful. Patricia emerged from her house just as Jake was finishing. She stood on her front porch, staring at her snow-covered lawn with her mouth hanging open. Her face turned red, then purple, and for a moment I thought she might actually explode. "What have you done?" she shrieked. "This is destruction of property. I'm calling the police." "Go ahead," I called back. "I'm just returning the snow that mysteriously appeared on my property. Officer Martinez already filed a report about it this morning. I figured you'd want it back. You can't do this. This is against HOA regulations. So is blocking someone's driveway." But here we are. Patricia disappeared into her house, and I could hear her shouting into her phone. Jake and I high-fived, and several neighbors clapped. It felt good to finally push back against the tyranny of the HOA queen. I made it to work by noon, which was better than I'd hoped. My boss was understanding once I explained the full situation, especially since I'd been a reliable employee for 5 years. The rest of the day passed normally, but my phone buzzed constantly with texts from neighbors updating me on the situation at Patricia's house. She'd called the police again, but according to Danny, the same Officer Martinez had shown up and basically told her that this was a civil matter between neighbors. She'd screamed about HOA violations and property damage, but the officer pointed out that snow wasn't permanent property damage, and that she'd started the whole thing by blocking my driveway. Patricia had apparently retreated into her house and slammed the door hard enough to rattle the windows. When I got home that evening, I found a notice taped to my front door. It was from the HOA, of course, written on official letterhead, and signed by Patricia Whitmore in her capacity as HOA president. The notice informed me that I was being fined $2,000 for unauthorized snow removal and destruction of common area aesthetics. It also stated that I was required to remove all snow from Patricia's property within 24 hours or face additional fines of $500 per day. I took a photo of the notice and called my lawyer. I'd found an attorney named Sarah Chen 3 months ago when Patricia's harassment had started getting out of hand. Sarah specialized in property law and HOA disputes, and she'd been helping me document everything for a potential lawsuit. "She's trying to fine you for returning snow that she illegally dumped on your property," Sarah asked after I explained the situation. "That's bold even for her. Can she do this? Absolutely not. HOA boards have authority over certain matters, but they can't fine you for protecting your property rights. Blocking your driveway was illegal, and you had every right to remove the snow. Where you put it afterward is irrelevant from a legal standpoint, especially since it came from her actions in the first place. So, what do I do? Ignore the fine. Don't pay a single penny. In fact, I think it's time we went on the offense. You've been documenting her harassment for months now. We have emails, violation notices, photos, and now a police report about her blocking your driveway. I think we have enough for a restraining order and a civil lawsuit. You really think we can win? Henry, I've been doing this for 15 years. Patricia Whitmore is a textbook case of HOA abuse of power. She's been using her position to harass you because of a personal vendetta. That's illegal. We can sue her personally and the HOA as an organization. You'll likely win damages for emotional distress, lost wages from today, and we can get an injunction preventing her from taking any further action against you." We spent the next hour going over strategy. Sarah would file paperwork in the morning for a restraining order and start preparing the lawsuit. She estimated it would take a few months to work through the court system, but she was confident we'd prevail. That night, I barely slept. Part of me was excited about finally standing up to Patricia in a meaningful way, but another part was nervous about the escalation. Lawsuits were expensive and time-consuming, and there was no guarantee things would work out the way Sarah predicted. The next morning, I woke up to find my navy blue front door covered in eggs. Someone had thrown at least 24 eggs at it during the night, and the yolks had frozen in the January cold, creating a disgusting mess. My mailbox had also been knocked over, and someone had spray-painted HOA violation across my garage door in bright red letters. I took photos of everything and called Officer Martinez directly. He'd given me his card the previous day and told me to contact him if anything else happened. He arrived within 20 minutes and looked genuinely angry when he saw the vandalism. "This crossed a line," he said, taking his own photos. "This is criminal mischief, possibly harassment. Do you have any security cameras?" "No, but I'm definitely getting some today." "Good idea. I'm going to talk to Mrs. Whitmore again. If she's responsible for this, she's going to face charges." Officer Martinez went to Patricia's house, and this time the conversation was much shorter and more heated. I couldn't hear the specific words, but I could see Patricia gesturing angrily while the officer stood firm. When he returned, he looked frustrated. "She denies any involvement, says she was home all night and has no knowledge of who might have vandalized your property." "You don't believe her, do you?" "Honestly, no. But again, I need evidence. Unless you saw her do it or have video footage, I can't arrest her based on suspicion alone." Officer Martinez filed another report and said he'd increase patrols in the neighborhood. He also suggested I contact my homeowner's insurance about the damage to my garage door. The spray paint would need professional removal, and that wouldn't be cheap. I called Sarah and updated her on the situation. She was silent for a long moment before speaking. "Henry, this is actually good for our case. I know that sounds terrible, but Patricia is making our argument for us. She's escalating the harassment to criminal behavior. The judge is going to see a clear pattern of conduct here. I just want this to stop. It will, trust me. We're filing the restraining order today. Once that's in place, if she comes near you or your property, she goes to jail. That should cool her down." I spent the rest of the morning cleaning egg off my door and waiting for a locksmith to come change my locks. I didn't think Patricia had keys to my house, but I wasn't taking any chances. I also ordered a comprehensive security camera system online with next-day delivery. If there were going to be any more incidents, I wanted video evidence. Around noon, I got a call from Danny. "Dude, you need to see this. Patricia is having an emergency HOA meeting at her house right now. She's trying to get the board to vote you out of the neighborhood. She can't do that. I own my house." "I know, but she's claiming you're a danger to the community and wants to force you to sell." "A bunch of people are here, and it's getting crazy." I drove over to Patricia's house and found about 20 neighbors gathered in her living room. The space was decorated exactly how I'd imagined, with motivational posters about leadership and several framed photos of Patricia receiving various community service awards. She stood at the front of the room with a whiteboard behind her, looking like a general planning a military campaign. "You're not welcome here," Patricia said when she saw me. "This is a closed meeting for HOA board members only." "Really?" "Because I see a lot of people here who aren't on the board, and according to the HOA bylaws, any member can attend a board meeting if proper notice is given." You weren't given notice because you're the subject of the meeting. That's a conflict of interest. That's not how this works, Patricia. And you know it. Several neighbors murmured in agreement. I noticed that many of the people present were my allies, including Danny, Mrs. Chen, and Mr. Patterson. They'd come to support me, not Patricia. Fine, Patricia snapped. Stay if you want. It doesn't matter. The board is voting to revoke your membership in the HOA and force the sale of your property based on your continued violations and destructive behavior. On what grounds? I asked. I haven't violated anything. You blocked my driveway illegally and I removed the snow. That's not a violation. Patricia pulled out a thick folder. You've received 17 violation notices in the past 6 months. Your front door violates the approved color scheme. Your mailbox violates the uniformity requirements. Your grass has exceeded the maximum height on multiple occasions. You've left trash cans visible from the street. You've failed to shovel your sidewalk within the required time frame after snowfall. And yesterday, you committed an act of vandalism by dumping snow on my property. Those violations are bogus, and you know it. You've been harassing me because I refuse to pay a ridiculous fine for painting my own front door. The rules exist for a reason, Patricia said. They maintain property values and community standards. If you don't like the rules, you shouldn't live in an HOA neighborhood. The rules are supposed to be applied fairly and reasonably. You've been targeting me specifically while ignoring actual violations from other homeowners. That's a lie. Is it? Danny's garage door has been broken for 2 months. Mrs. Chen has a vegetable garden in her front yard that's definitely not approved landscaping. Mr. Patterson parks his RV on the street overnight at least twice a week. But none of them have received violation notices because they don't challenge your authority. The room erupted in chatter. Several people nodded in agreement while others looked uncomfortable. Patricia's face turned red again, and I could see her struggling to maintain control. This meeting is over, she announced. The board will vote in private and you'll be notified of the decision. Actually, that's not legal either, said a voice from the back of the room. Everyone turned to see Sarah Chen walking in, carrying her briefcase and looking every bit the professional attorney. I hadn't known she was coming, but I was grateful for the backup. Who are you? Patricia demanded. I'm Sarah Chen, Mr. Owens' attorney. And I'm here to inform you that any vote taken today regarding my client will be null and void. Furthermore, I'm serving you with these papers. She walked forward and handed Patricia a manila envelope. That's a restraining order and notice of a civil lawsuit. You're prohibited from contacting Mr. Owens, going near his property, or taking any action against him in your capacity as HOA president. Any violation of that order will result in your arrest. Patricia stared at the papers like they might explode. You can't do this. I'm the HOA president. I have a right to enforce community rules. You have a responsibility to follow the law, which you've repeatedly failed to do. The court has reviewed the evidence of your harassment campaign against Mr. Owens and determined that a restraining order is warranted. Additionally, we're suing you personally and the HOA for harassment, abuse of authority, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The room fell silent. Everyone stared at Patricia, waiting for her response. She looked around at her neighbors, and I could see the reality sinking in. She'd pushed too far, and now there would be consequences. This isn't over, Patricia said quietly. I'll fight this. I'll prove that I was just doing my job. I look forward to seeing you in court, Sarah replied. The meeting disbanded quickly after that. People filed out of Patricia's house, many of them stopping to shake my hand or offer words of support. Danny clapped me on the shoulder and promised to testify on my behalf if needed. Mrs. Chen invited me over for dinner later in the week. Even Mr. Patterson, who barely spoke to anyone, said he was glad someone was finally standing up to the HOA tyranny. Over the next few days, things were relatively quiet. Patricia stayed away from me and my property, presumably on advice from her own lawyer. My security cameras arrived, and I spent an afternoon installing them around my house. The system was comprehensive, with cameras covering every angle of my property and cloud backup for all footage. If anyone tried anything else, I'd have ironclad evidence. The HOA board held another meeting the following week, this time without Patricia. The vice president, a reasonable guy named Tom Morrison, took over and announced that the board would not be pursuing any action against me. They'd reviewed the situation and determined that Patricia had been acting outside her authority. Tom also mentioned that several board members were calling for Patricia's resignation, though she was fighting it. My lawsuit moved forward through the court system. Sarah filed all the necessary paperwork, and we compiled a massive evidence file documenting every instance of Patricia's harassment. We had emails, violation notices, photos, text messages from witnesses, police reports, and sworn statements from neighbors. The case was airtight. Patricia's attorney tried to get the restraining order dismissed, arguing that his client needed to perform her duties as HOA president. The judge rejected the motion and actually extended the restraining order after reviewing the evidence. He called Patricia's behavior concerning and said it showed a pattern of abuse that warranted continued protection for me. 2 months after the snow incident, our case went to mediation. Sarah explained that most civil cases never went to trial because the cost and risk of a jury verdict usually pushed both sides toward settlement. Patricia's insurance company was representing her, and they wanted to resolve the matter quickly and cheaply. We sat in a conference room at the law office, with Patricia and her lawyer on one side of the table and Sarah and me on the other. A professional mediator worked between us, carrying offers back and forth. Patricia looked terrible, like she hadn't been sleeping well. The stress was clearly getting to her. The mediation lasted 6 hours. Patricia's insurance company offered to pay me $25,000 to settle all claims and drop the lawsuit. Sarah countered at $75,000, pointing out the documented damage to my property, lost wages, emotional distress, and attorney fees. We eventually settled at $50,000, with Patricia agreeing to resign from the HOA board and not oppose the removal of all fines she'd assessed against me. Sarah also negotiated a clause requiring Patricia to make a public apology to me at the next HOA meeting, and to acknowledge that her treatment of me had been inappropriate and contrary to HOA rules. Patricia's attorney tried to remove that requirement, but Sarah stood firm. Patricia would apologize publicly, or there was no deal. In the end, Patricia signed the agreement. She had no choice. The evidence against her was overwhelming, and if we went to trial, a jury would likely award even more money. She also faced the possibility of criminal charges if the prosecutor decided to pursue the vandalism case. 3 weeks later, I attended an HOA meeting for the first time in months. The meeting was held at the community clubhouse, and about 40 neighbors showed up. Word had spread about the settlement, and people wanted to see Patricia's apology. Tom Morrison called the meeting to order and quickly addressed the elephant in the room. "Before we begin our regular business, Patricia Whitmore has something she'd like to say." Patricia stood up slowly. She looked like she'd aged 10 years in the past few months. Her signature haircut was growing out, and she wasn't wearing her usual aggressive makeup. She took a deep breath and read from a prepared statement. I want to apologize to Henry Owens for my behavior over the past several months. I allowed personal feelings to influence my decisions as HOA president, and I treated Mr. Owens unfairly. I issued violation notices that were not warranted and took actions that exceeded my authority. I particularly regret blocking his driveway with snow, which was wrong and illegal. I'm resigning from my position as HOA president, effective immediately, and I hope the community can move forward in a more positive direction. The room was silent for a moment. Then I stood up. I accept your apology, Patricia. I hope this has been a learning experience for everyone. HOA rules exist to maintain our community, not to give one person power over others. I look forward to working with the new board to create a more reasonable and fair system. Several people applauded. Tom Morrison thanked us both and announced that elections for a new HOA president would be held next month. The meeting continued with normal business, discussing upcoming neighborhood events and maintenance issues. It felt good to be part of a community again rather than at war with it. After the meeting, several neighbors came up to thank me. Mrs. Chen said I'd inspired her to join the HOA board and push for rule changes. Danny joked that I should run for president, though I quickly declined. I'd had enough of HOA politics to last a lifetime. Patricia left the meeting quickly, not making eye contact with anyone. I felt a strange mixture of emotions watching her go. Part of me was satisfied that justice had been served, but another part felt sorry for her. She'd let power go to her head and destroyed her reputation in the community. That had to be hard to live with. The insurance check arrived 2 weeks later. $50,000 minus Sarah's fees left me with about $35,000. I used some of it to repair the spray paint damage on my garage door and to install a new, nicer mailbox. I also donated $5,000 to a local charity that helped homeowners fight unfair HOA practices. The rest went into my savings account. Life slowly returned to normal. The new HOA board, led by Tom Morrison, proved to be much more reasonable. They reviewed all the community rules and eliminated or modified the ones that were overly restrictive or petty. The front door color requirement was expanded to include any shade of blue, which meant my navy blue door was now officially approved. The grass height maximum was relaxed by ½ an inch. The trash can visibility rule was changed to 72 hours instead of 12, which was much more realistic. The board also implemented new oversight procedures to prevent future abuse of power. All violation notices now had to be approved by at least 2 board members, not just the president. Homeowners gained the right to appeal fines to the full board, with the accused having a chance to present their case. And the board established term limits for all positions to prevent anyone from entrenching themselves in power. I ran into Patricia at the grocery store about a month after the settlement. We made eye contact across the produce section, and for a moment I thought she might turn and leave. Instead, she walked over. "Henry," she said quietly. "I know I apologized at the meeting, but I wanted to say it again in private. I'm truly sorry for what I put you through. I was wrong." I studied her face, looking for signs of insincerity but found none. She genuinely seemed remorseful. "I appreciate that, Patricia. We all make mistakes. The important thing is learning from them." "I've learned a lot," she said. "About myself, mostly. I thought I was helping the community by enforcing the rules strictly, but I was really just on a power trip. The lawsuit and everything that followed was a wake-up call. I'm in therapy now, working on my control issues. That's good. I'm glad you're getting help. I'm thinking about moving," Patricia continued, "starting fresh somewhere else. Every time I drive through the neighborhood, I'm reminded of what I did. It's hard." "I understand. But you don't have to leave. People forgive and forget. Give it time. Patricia smiled sadly. Maybe we'll see. Anyway, I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry, truly sorry. She walked away before I could respond, leaving me standing in the produce section with a lot to think about. Despite everything she'd put me through, I didn't hate Patricia. She was a human being who'd made mistakes, and she was trying to make amends. That took courage. Spring arrived in Syracuse, bringing warmer weather and melting all the snow that had caused so much trouble. My lawn turned green, and I spent weekends working in my yard, planting flowers and fixing up my property. The neighborhood felt different now, more relaxed and friendly. People actually talked to each other instead of worrying about HOA violations. Danny hosted a block party in May, and almost everyone from the street attended. We grilled burgers and hot dogs, drank beer, and let the kids play in the street. It was the kind of community gathering that should happen regularly in a neighborhood, but rarely does. Tom Morrison gave a short speech thanking everyone for their patience during the transition period and expressing hope for the future. I noticed Patricia watching from her window but not participating. A few weeks later, a "for sale" sign appeared in her yard. She decided to move after all. Part of me felt bad about that, but I understood her reasoning. Sometimes you need a fresh start, and there were too many bad memories for her in Meadowbrook Hills. The day Patricia moved out, I was working in my front yard. She loaded boxes into a moving truck while a few workers carried furniture. I thought about going over to say goodbye, but I wasn't sure if that would be welcome. As if reading my mind, Patricia walked across the street and stood at the edge of my property. "I'm leaving," she said unnecessarily. "I can see that. Where are you going?" "Vermont. I have a sister there. I'll stay with her while I figure things out." "Good luck, Patricia, I mean that. Thank you, and Henry. For what it's worth, you were right, about everything. The rules, the fines, all of it. I was wrong, and I'm sorry I put you through hell." "I appreciate you saying that. I hope Vermont treats you well." Patricia nodded and walked back to her house. An hour later, the moving truck pulled away, and she drove off in her Mercedes. I never saw her again. The new family that bought Patricia's house was wonderful. The Johnsons were a young couple with 2 kids, and a golden retriever named Buddy. They immediately violated at least 3 old HOA rules by painting their front door red, installing a wooden swing set in the backyard that was visible from the street, and letting Buddy run around without a leash during playtime. Nobody complained. The neighborhood had learned that rules should serve people, not the other way around. 6 months after the snow incident, I attended an HOA meeting where Tom Morrison announced that the board had revised the community bylaws to include stronger protections for homeowners. No single board member could issue fines without approval from the majority. All violation notices had to include photographic evidence and cite specific rule violations. Homeowners gained the right to face their accusers and present evidence in their defense. And the board established an ombudsman position to investigate complaints about HOA overreach. "These changes are largely thanks to Henry Owens," Tom said. "His willingness to stand up to abuse of power has made our community stronger and fairer." "Henry, would you like to say anything?" I stood up, feeling awkward with everyone looking at me. "I just want to say that I love this neighborhood. I bought my house here because I wanted to be part of a community. What happened with Patricia was unfortunate, but it taught us all valuable lessons. Rules are important, but so are fairness, compassion, and common sense. I'm proud of how we've come together to make Meadowbrook Hills a better place to live." People applauded, and the meeting continued with normal business. As I sat there, listening to discussions about playground equipment and street repaving, I felt genuinely happy. The nightmare was over, and I'd not only survived but helped create positive change. The following winter, Syracuse got hit with another massive snowstorm. I woke up to find 2 feet of fresh snow covering everything. The street was buried, driveways were blocked, and everyone faced a long day of shoveling and snow removal. I went outside to start clearing my driveway and found Jake already there with his plow truck. "What are you doing here?" I asked. "Helping out my friend," Jake said with a grin. "After what happened last year, I figured you might be a little nervous about snow. Don't worry, I'll make sure it all goes in the right place this time. You don't have to do this." "I know, I want to." "You stood up to that bully and made a difference. That's worth celebrating." As Jake plowed my driveway, other neighbors came out with their shovels and snow blowers. Mrs. Chen worked on her walkway while Mr. Johnson helped Mr. Patterson with his porch. Danny cleared the sidewalk in front of several houses, not just his own. It was a community effort with everyone pitching in to help everyone else. That's when I realized the real victory wasn't the money from the lawsuit or even Patricia's resignation. The real victory was this moment, with neighbors working together and actually caring about each other. Patricia's harassment had been awful, but fighting back against it had brought the community together in a way that never would have happened otherwise. Later that day, I was sitting in my living room drinking hot chocolate when my phone rang. It was Sarah Chen, my attorney. "Henry, I wanted to give you an update. Remember how I said we reported Patricia's vandalism to the prosecutor?" "Yeah, but I thought they weren't going to pursue charges." "They weren't, initially. But something new has come up. The police received an anonymous tip about Patricia's activities as HOA president. They investigated and discovered she'd been embezzling from the HOA budget for years. Apparently, she was issuing fake fines to homeowners who had already moved away, collecting the money, and pocketing it instead of depositing it into the HOA account. How much are we talking about? Over $100,000. The police have frozen her bank accounts and issued a warrant for her arrest. They've been trying to reach her in Vermont, but she's not at her sister's house. No one knows where she is. The news hit me like a punch to the gut. I'd thought the Patricia situation was resolved, but apparently it was just beginning a new chapter. What happens now? The police are searching for her. Given the amount of money involved, she's facing serious felony charges. If convicted, she could go to prison for years. The HOA will also likely sue to recover the stolen funds. Wow, I knew she was controlling, but I never thought she was a thief. "Power corrupts," Sarah said, "and absolute power corrupts absolutely." Patricia had total control over the HOA finances with no oversight. It was too tempting, I guess. After hanging up with Sarah, I sat in silence for a long time. Part of me felt vindicated. Patricia had been even worse than I'd imagined, and now she'd face real consequences. But another part felt sad. She'd destroyed her life over money and power, and for what? She'd lost everything that mattered: her reputation, her home, her community, and soon her freedom. I called Danny and told him the news. Within hours, everyone in the neighborhood knew. The revelation that Patricia had been stealing from the HOA budget sent shockwaves through Meadowbrook Hills. People were angry, betrayed, and worried about whether they'd ever recover the stolen money. Tom Morrison called an emergency board meeting to address the situation. The meeting was packed with concerned homeowners demanding answers. Tom explained that the board had hired a forensic accountant to review all HOA financial records from the past 5 years. The initial audit confirmed that Patricia had been systematically stealing money through fake fines, inflated vendor invoices, and direct transfers from the HOA account to her personal accounts. "How did this go on for so long without anyone noticing?" someone asked. Patricia controlled all financial records and reporting, Tom explained. She was the only person with access to the accounts, and she provided quarterly summaries to the board that appeared legitimate. We never thought to question them or conduct independent audits. That was our failure, and I take responsibility for it. The board announced several immediate changes. All HOA financial accounts would now require 2 signatures for any transaction over $500. A professional accounting firm would be hired to manage the books and provide monthly reports, and the board would conduct annual independent audits to ensure transparency. 3 weeks later, I was watching the evening news when a breaking story caught my attention. Patricia Whitmore had been arrested at the Canadian border trying to flee the country. She'd been driving a rental car and had approximately $40,000 in cash hidden in the trunk. The news showed footage of her being led away in handcuffs, looking defeated and small. The trial was scheduled for 6 months later, but Patricia never made it to court. She took a plea deal, agreeing to plead guilty to multiple counts of theft and fraud in exchange for a reduced sentence. She was ordered to pay full restitution of $115,000 and sentenced to 5 years in prison. The judge called her crimes a betrayal of community trust and said she'd shown a pattern of abusing her position for personal gain. I didn't attend the sentencing hearing, but Sarah went and gave me a full report. Patricia had cried and apologized, claiming that financial stress and personal problems had driven her to steal. The judge wasn't sympathetic, noting that Patricia had targeted vulnerable homeowners and used her authority to intimidate anyone who questioned her. The HOA eventually recovered about $60,000 by seizing Patricia's remaining assets, including her car and various personal property. The rest would come from restitution payments Patricia would be required to make from prison and after her release. It wasn't the full amount, but it was better than nothing. Life continued to move forward. The HOA board used the recovered funds to make overdue repairs to community property and to lower annual dues. They also established a memorial scholarship fund for neighborhood kids going to college, naming it after Mr. Patterson, who'd passed away peacefully in his sleep that spring at the age of 87. I remained active in the HOA, attending meetings and serving on various committees. I wanted to make sure that what happened with Patricia never happened again. The new board was transparent, accountable, and genuinely interested in serving the community rather than controlling it. 2 years after the snow incident, I was elected vice president of the HOA board. It was ironic considering how I'd once been the neighborhood's biggest rule violator and thorn in Patricia's side. But people appreciated my willingness to stand up for what was right and my commitment to fairness and common sense. On a cold January morning, exactly 2 years after Patricia had blocked my driveway with snow, I stood in my front yard looking at my navy blue door and my thriving neighborhood. The Johnsons were building a snowman with their kids. Mrs. Chen was taking photos of her garden covered in pristine white snow. Danny was helping his elderly neighbor clear her walkway. It was a normal, peaceful scene in a healthy community. I thought about everything that had happened, and how one petty act of revenge had spiraled into exposing corruption, rebuilding a community, and ultimately sending someone to prison. If Patricia had just let me keep my navy blue door, none of it would have happened. But she couldn't let go of control, and it destroyed her. The snow that morning was beautiful, covering everything in a clean white blanket. I grabbed my shovel and started clearing my driveway, making sure to put the snow in appropriate places along the edges of my property. As I worked, neighbors waved and called out greetings. Jake drove by in his plow truck and honked hello. A new family moving into Patricia's old house pulled up with a moving truck. I walked over to introduce myself to the new neighbors, a retired couple from Buffalo named George and Linda. They were friendly and excited about joining the community. I told them about the neighborhood, the HOA, and how we'd worked hard to create a fair and welcoming environment. "That sounds wonderful," Linda said. "We were worried about HOA restrictions. Our last neighborhood was terrible. The HOA president was this awful woman who made everyone's life miserable." I smiled. "We had one of those too, but things are different now. We learned some hard lessons about the importance of accountability and fairness. You're going to love it here." As I walked back to my house, I felt genuinely at peace. The nightmare with Patricia had been awful, but it had led to positive change. The neighborhood was stronger, the community was closer, and people had learned that standing up to abuse of power was worth the effort. My navy blue front door gleamed in the winter sunlight, a symbol of the battle I'd fought and won. It was just a door, painted a color I liked. But it represented something more. The right to make decisions about my own property, to live without fear of petty harassment, and to be part of a community based on mutual respect rather than authoritarian control. The snow incident seemed like ancient history now, a strange and dramatic chapter in my life that had ultimately led to good things. Patricia was serving her sentence. I'd recovered from the harassment, and Meadowbrook Hills had transformed into the kind of neighborhood people actually wanted to live in. As I finished shoveling my driveway and went inside to warm up with hot coffee, I reflected on the lessons I'd learned. Sometimes standing up to bullies means fighting back, even when it seems petty or childish. Sometimes justice takes time and requires patience and documentation and legal help. And sometimes the worst situations lead to the best outcomes if you're willing to see them through. I never regretted plowing that snow onto Patricia's lawn. It was a turning point, a moment when I decided I wouldn't be a victim anymore. Everything that followed, both good and bad, flowed from that decision. And in the end, justice prevailed. Patricia faced consequences for her actions. The community came together and implemented real reforms, and I learned that I was stronger than I'd thought. The story of HOA Karen and the snow became neighborhood legend, passed down to new residents as a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked power and the importance of community oversight. Kids who were too young to remember asked their parents about the snow war and why everyone was so careful about where they put their snow. Adults used it as shorthand for explaining why the HOA board had so many checks and balances. Years would pass, and I'd eventually sell my house and move on to new adventures. But I'd always remember that January morning when I woke up to find my driveway blocked and decided to fight back. It changed my life, changed the neighborhood, and proved that ordinary people can stand up to injustice and win. The navy blue door stayed, a permanent reminder that some rules are meant to be questioned, some battles are worth fighting, and some victories are measured not in dollars or satisfaction, but in the positive changes they bring to a community. And whenever it snowed, I made sure to clear my driveway carefully and put the snow exactly where it belonged, never forgetting the consequences of one woman's petty revenge and one man's decision to push back.